That's all right.
Righty, so it looks like we are live now. I've got a couple of team members here looking at the different various chats that are available, so they'll be feeding me questions. We are kind of on a time crunch here. We do have to end in exactly about 59 minutes or about an hour. So we're going to go fairly quickly through this first half, and then we'll have about a second half for questions. So just to kind of go through what we're going to be talking about today is we are going to be creating a production-ready React application kind of from scratch, and also hook that into the mock API flight data that we're providing for this hackathon. And so we are going to go ahead and jump right in. We did have as a prereq, we tried to send it out as soon as possible. If you guys would like to follow along, you're totally willing to. But we just can't kind of stop for questions throughout it because we are on time crunch. But I do want to say, if you do want to follow along, make sure you have Node installed. So that's nodejs.org. And we're going to go ahead and kind of jump right into it. And so first I'm going to kind of start talking off about what React is really quick. So React is kind of a way to create UIs really quickly. It was really just meant for that, just the UI part of it, just kind of getting it up and running. But you know, for a full-fledged application, there's a lot more that goes on. There's a backend. There's you know, different ways to communicate with APIs. There's image optimization, different languages, things like that. And so you know, you really need a lot more than just a UI to be able to get an application up and running. And so there's another package called Next.js made by a company called Vercel, and that's what I'm sharing my screen on right now, that has a ton of different packages and stuff kind of wrapped in all into one to kind of handle all of these things for you. So that's what we're actually going to be going through today and actually setting up an application for, and then we're going to hook it into our mock flight API to kind of show you how to pull some data, which should give you a great base layer for creating an application, whether it's this hack or next one or any time in the future. So this is that package there, nextjs.org. You can scroll down and see some of the different things that come into it, some of the great ways that make it really easy to build an app on. You can see all the different companies that use it, American Airlines being one of them. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. I'm going to go ahead and open up a terminal. I'm on Mac, but this should just work just as well on Windows. And if I can get this up there, move. Alrighty, let's go and make a new directory. We'll just go ahead and call this one sunhacks, just so I can move this off there. Awesome. And we're just going to kind of stick to this documentation for a quick second here, just to kind of show y'all how to spin it up. So right here, you'll see that this is the quickest way to get up and running. I actually have a CLI, really easy. We're going to go ahead and copy paste that. It's npx create next app -- TypeScript. So for those that don't know, we use TypeScript a ton, American. It's kind of like JavaScript with types. So there's where TypeScript comes involved. We honestly think it's probably one of the best languages going forward. It's super versatile, front end, back end. You can use it anywhere. And so it's super useful to know. NPX comes bundled with Node.js. So if you installed Node, you'll get NPX. That just tells it to execute a certain package on the registry. In this case, we are executing create next app. So we're going to make a new next app using TypeScript. And so that's what that flag there is for. So we'll go ahead and execute that. And it'll ask, are you sure you want to install it? I'm going to say, yes, that's fine. And then it'll ask us some questions here. So what's your project named? I'm just going to call it my app for now. You can call it whatever you'd like. And then it's going to go through some install steps here, and it's going to install all the dependencies we need. The three that we need the most, obviously, React, which is going to be the library that we're actually going to use to create the UI. React DOM is the library that turns React code into actual browser code so that it can show up on the page, manipulate what's being seen by the user. And then Next is the library that I talked about that kind of has everything wrapped in to make this a real production-ready app. And so while this is kind of going through, I do want to point out as well that throughout the hackathon, there might be a lot of different things you want to do, or just in personal projects and stuff. Their documentation on Next.js is fantastic. They have an entire learning section that takes you through step by step on how to learn all the different things that it allows that you can do with it, and has like quiz, knowledge checks, and different things throughout that are really just for you to make sure you're understanding as you go through it. So fantastic documentation. I highly recommend it for anything you're doing. All right, so I just went ahead and finished downloading. So it says here it's got some helpful commands we can run. So they suggest the first thing to do is to kind of cd into your app. So cd my app and run npm run dev. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And so what you'll see here is it says started your server. So we can actually go ahead and hit that URL. And right away, you'll see pretty shortly here after it loads up that we actually have an app ready to go. So right there, welcome to Next.js, get started by editing that page. And so, there's the documentation, learning and stuff, but this is ready to go. This is an app we can use now. Whatever you'd like. And I'm going to get this Zoom stuff out of the way. All righty. Yes, I can make my text larger. All right. Perfect. All right, so I've got my application open here. So you can see here in the folder structure for the app, it kind of set up a bunch of folders and files for us. We're going to kind of go through a couple of them really quick here, but it's actually very, very simple the way they have it set up, which is fantastic. So you'll see here at the top, let's go through some of the folders. .next, that's just the build directory. That's where your built files are going. So in here is all of the stuff that's ready for production. Node modules are all of the dependencies. So React, React DOM, and Next, and everything else they require is kind of put into this folder. The pages folder is actually the pages of the application. We'll go more into that here in a second. Public are things that are publicly accessible, such as they have a logo on here for their Vercel logo, a favicon so that it shows up on the tab of the user's browser. They have a styles folder, has some styles in the application. They have one for global styles and one for the home page styles. And then they have some other things here at the root, like lintings, that's just helping with code styling, git ignore, making sure certain things aren't being committed to Git on GitHub. And next environment, those are some environment types things. Those are some things for TypeScript. You won't need to get into that. A configuration document in here really it just says React strict mode, which is just making sure that you're not kind of, hurting yourself by writing some code that might not be best for production, but there's a ton of other stuff you can put in there. So if you are looking to go further, you'll probably expand on that a little bit. We'll skip over the package JSON because I do want to go in depth on that. Then there's a README, which kind of talks about how to start the app and some more information on how to learn more about the application. And a tsconfig file. This just tells the application how to compile the code from TypeScript to JavaScript. Because TypeScript is a compiled language, it has types and things that the browser doesn't understand, so it has to turn it from TypeScript into JavaScript through compilation. These are all the settings for that compiler. So we don't really need to worry about that much. We're going to kind of stick with the defaults for this talk and this weekend. I do want to talk about the package JSON file a little bit because there are some things in here you're going to want to know. So obviously at the top there, you've got your name. I called it my app. We have a version number. We're just on version 0.1. That is up to you to choose the version number, increment it whenever you make changes, leave it alone, totally up to you. Private just lets us not accidentally publish this app for the public to see. It's kind of a good default setting. And then we've got, and we've actually already run one of these. We ran dev when we did npm run dev. That ran this script here. This is the reference to it. And that ran next dev. So next is a CLI, a command line interface that comes with Next.js installed. So next dev starts the dev server for the Next.js application. In this case, it's my app. There are some other ones in here, such as build. So that's for production. When you're ready to actually push this to production, you will do build and then start. So that builds the production environment, starts the production environment, and then lint. So that'll make sure that all your code is good. There's no obvious bugs in it or any things that might trip you up in the future. That'll just kind of help you out there. And then obviously dependencies here, but there are two sections that I want to talk about really quick. Dependencies are things that are needed for the production app. These are things you will want to be actually out there in production that the app needs to run. Dev dependencies are just really things you need as developers to build the app. So you'll need the types for React so that you can have the helpful IntelliSense when you're typing out here. TypeScript, obviously that's the language we're using. So that's actually the compiler. And then two more in here are ESLint and ESLint config next. That's about that linting I talked about. So with this lint script up here and this ESLint file, both of those kind of set up the rules on how the application should kind of be written. It kind of has some rules in there like don't do this, this might cause a problem in the future, and some other things like that. So we actually might see some of that as we kind of write some code here. But the piece of this that I really want to get into is actually writing some code. That's the biggest part we want to get into. It's really great to understand this, but there's documentation for this if you're curious to learn about all the little things about this. But let's get into actually writing some code. So if we actually go into the pages directory, you'll actually see some different things in here. There's an API folder, which we're not going to be using for this tutorial, but know that you could build out an API with this as well. There's an app folder, which kind of sets up some boilerplate code. Again, for this purposes, we're just kind of leave this alone. And then there's an index file. So the cool thing about Next.js is that the way that routing happens, so if I go to Safari and I go to the URL here, you'll see this is just at localhost 3000. It's at the root of the application. This is being routed to because it's being routed to pages index. So this is the root of the application. If I were to rename this file to say hello, and then the code itself will automatically recompile because we are running the dev server. You'll actually see that now we get a 404 on this page at the root because we've renamed it to hello. So if we change this at the top here, I can't really zoom in on the URL bar, but I've got /hello on the end there. You'll see that now we get that page again because we've renamed it. And so that's really useful when you're creating multiple pages. You know, you might want a page for, in our case, flights, maybe one for a specific flight for information about it. So there's different things you can do there. But for today's purpose, I'm going to go ahead and rename that back to the index to get back to the home page, so that it's at the root. And I'm going to go ahead and change my URL back to the root. Perfect, back on the home page. And let's go ahead and start modifying it. So you'll see here, we've got a header that says, welcome to Next.js. Get started by editing, and then the file name. And then we've got a couple of links in here and a powered by Vercel bottom. So let's go ahead and start modifying this just to kind of see how this works. And if you are following along or if you're watching on the screen, you'll notice this might look a little different than regular JavaScript or TypeScript if you've used it. So you'll see in here that most of this is the same. You're importing different things. You've got a function in here called home that's got a type of next page. So you'll see here, this is the cool thing about TypeScript is now we can actually give this a type. So if I hover over home, you'll see this has a type of next page in there. So now this has certain return types and certain parameters that are useful to know. But this is the part that's really interesting is we're actually returning what looks to be some HTML in here. And this is kind of the primary thing for Next.js is you can actually kind of mix your logical code with your UI code in here. So we've got this HTML type looking code mixed in with some TypeScript in this as well. And so let's go ahead and let's modify some of this. So, we see our welcome to Next.js right there. I'm going to go ahead and say welcome to sunhacks instead. So we're going to modify that. There we go. Welcome to sunhacks. And so we can go ahead and modify things in here. You could do links like we had in there. You could do paragraph tags. You could do different header tags. So this is now an H1, but we could actually make this like an H2 tag or an H6 tag, because this is really just HTML. And so as you change things, they kind of change on the front end based on what you're doing in here. And so this is actually really cool because now you can kind of mix that logic with your code, and it's really easy to modify the front end. So let's go ahead and jump in. What we want to do is we really want to actually use our API. So if you've seen in our Discord channel, we do have an API that's available. It is, oh gosh, I don't have the link open for it, called Flight Engine. It's linked in our Discord channel, but this is the repository for it. It gives you just what it says: mock flight data delivered simply and quickly without a database. So you don't need to set up a database, but all of this data will be generated on the fly, and it will be the same between team members. So let's say all 4 of you, download this to your laptop and you all run the code. It'll all give you the exact same data, even though it doesn't have a database. If you're curious about the actual how that works, there's some cool technical stuff in here I wrote towards the bottom. But let's just go ahead and get right into it. So if you just want to deploy and use it, 1-click button right there. But I've actually already got one up and running that I'm going to go ahead and utilize for sake of time, because we're kind of running out of time. And so I've got this up here. So in the URL, wrong button. In the URL up here towards the top, I've got the URL from my deployed application /flights, and I'm querying for the date of 2021-10/1. So that's today. So this is showing me all the flights in here that we have for today. So there's a flight 5286 going from DFW to Philadelphia. It's got a departure date and arrival time. It even has things such as the duration of the flight. So it's 21 hours and 21 minutes. That is a very long flight. It is all random data, so you might not get 100% accurate information, but it will at least let you generate some things on the fly. And this is all modifiable. If you wanted to change some things in this, you can modify all this and tweak it. It's really just for the structure. But you have things in here such as the aircraft. So this is a 757. It's got the passenger capacity. It goes 380 miles an hour. You've got the speed. So there's a lot of things in here you can use. So we're going to go ahead and use this and kind of show how you can update this application that we've bootstrapped. We haven't really changed anything, but how do we pull this into our application now to use this information? And so React makes this extremely easy for us. So let's go ahead and show this off. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this URL, the exact same one that gave me this data. So if you were to use the API, this is kind of the response you would get. And we want to just show this in here. So for right now, I'm just going to kind of remove some of this text in here just so we kind of get a blank slate to work with. Let's delete that and put our div back. All right, so now we have no text in here. Let's delete that as well. We have an empty div, so nothing is going to show on the page. If we go back to our application, it's just a blank page. We have nothing on here. So let's go ahead and see how we can actually fetch this data. So we've got the URL. I'll just go ahead and put that in a comment right there that we're going to want to fetch from. This will be your URL if you deploy this to use it. And if you need any help on this, we're available after the workshop as well to kind of help walk you through getting this set up, but it is extremely easy. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and jump into this. So we need to be able to fetch something from this. And one important thing to note is that right now we've been working with static data. Everything's been static, nothing's been changing. The website is just whatever we tell it to do. It shows up and then nothing ever changes. So we need to introduce something called state into this. So we need to be able to store something so that we can display and modify what's being shown on the page. And in this case, we want to be able to store the flights. So the way how you do that in React is you've got this function here being returned. And so we want to be able to store something. So I'm going to go ahead and write a line of code, and then I'm going to walk through each part of it to kind of explain everything that I kind of wrote down here really quick. All right, so this line of code that I just wrote right here, and I'll zoom in a little more there, that I just wrote on line 7. What we're doing here is there's a couple of concepts happening. So we're setting up a new constant. So it's a new constant variable that we're wanting to set up. And we actually have 2 right here. So if you've seen the array syntax on the other side of the equal sign over here, you'll know that that's setting up an array of something. This is kind of the opposite. React.useState is going to return an array, and we want to remove things from it. So there's React use state returns two things, the current state value and a function to change the state. So we want both of those. So what we're basically saying is, hey, we know there's always two things in that. We want the first one to be called flights as a variable and the second one to be called set flights as a variable. So this is kind of shorthand to be able to do that. The second half of it is actually how we're going to be able to store state. So what React calls this when you're doing this kind of functional state management is it's called hooks. So you're kind of hooking into React to say, hey, we need to store a state here that's going to be able to change later. And I want the value to start to be an empty array. So the empty array is saying, I want this to start as an empty array. And so if we hover over our flights here, you'll see it's getting a type of a never array because the empty array is saying that there's never anything inside of it. So just kind of a quick handy thing here, we're going to go ahead and change this to be an any array. So we're changing the type of the return to be an array that can contain anything. And that's just kind of for ease of the hackathon and everything. Just to say that let us have an array with anything inside of it. And so now flights has anything inside of it. And set flights is a dispatch, which is going to be a function that you can call, which is going to tell React, hey, I've got new values for that state. I want you to change that. And anything that uses flights, I want you to go update that on the front on the page. And so we'll see that a little more here once we actually start changing things, where whenever you call set flights, it's going to update your UI to show you the new value, which is really cool. Cool, so we've got this new thing, we're kind of holding the value in it, but nothing's ever changing, right? This is just being an empty array forever in our flights right there. So one thing we need to do is we need to be able to call a function. We need to be able to call this API and go fetch the data. But something important to know is that when this whole page is being called, because it's just a function itself, when this is being called, the browser's frozen. So when the browser is loading, they can't interact with anything while this function here, this page, is being called. So we don't want to wait for this URL to come back before the user can do anything. You know, maybe there's another link on the page that if this API call takes 10 seconds and someone just wants to click that link, do you want to make them wait 10 seconds to click that link? It's not the best user experience. And so what you want to do is actually set up something called an effect. So basically you want to tell React, finish what you're doing, render the page out, show what you're showing, and then I'm going to go ahead and I want to run this code at some point in the future. I want you to run it at some point in the future, do something with it, and then I'll do something based on the result of it. So we're going to go ahead and kind of the same way we did our use state, we're going to do react.use effect, right? So it's called an effect because you want it to do something at a later point in time. So we're going to call that function. And what you actually pass into effect is another function. So this is the code you want to be executed at some point in the future. And there's a second parameter on here that's actually really important. It's called the dependency array. So this effect is supposed to be affected by other things as well. So the second array parameter is an array of values that whenever they change, it reruns this code. For our purposes for fetching API data at this stage, we just want it to only ever run once. So we're just going to give it an empty array to basically say nothing will change, nothing will recall this. So make sure you have that empty array. Otherwise, you kind of get stuck in an infinite loop. So what we want to do is inside of this use effect, we want to be able to fetch some flights here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new function here called fetch flights. So I'm actually creating a function inside of a function, which is kind of cool. But I want this to be an async function that's going to be able to fetch those flights for me. And then I'm just going to go ahead and call that right afterwards. So now we have our effect where at some point in the future, it's going to call this outer function, which then creates a new function and then calls it immediately. And the reason why we need to do that is because we have asynchronous code. Effects must be synchronous. So we're essentially doing what's called a fire and forget. So you're basically saying, call this API, do some stuff with it, but if it fails, don't tell me about it. I don't care about the result really. And so that's what's happening here. And so we're going to go ahead and use the API that's built into the browsers. It's called fetch to be able to fetch this flight. So we've got our URL. I'm going to go ahead and copy that again. So we're going to go ahead and call it. So fetch is what it's called. And you pass in a URL to be able to fetch from. So there's our URL. It's got all of our parameters in it. And this is asynchronous. So you'll see here the response type, again, after the colon here. Oh my gosh. After the colon is of promise response. So if you've never heard of promises, it's essentially the way that JavaScript says, we're going to run some code that won't return for a while, but you have a handle to be able to see if it's returned and be able to add code to be called whenever it is returned. So it's a way for you to keep doing things in the future. But because we actually want to wait, in this case, we want to wait for this to come back because we want the result. We're actually going to call await on that. So we're going to await the fetch, and we want the result from that. So we're going to set up a new constant called res for response to say that we want the response of what that fetch is, and we're going to wait for it. But there's one really important thing to note is the type of that is response. And so if we're going to try to find the body of that, the response from the actual thing, you might do res dot, see what's inside of it. There is a body, but it's a readable stream, right? So it's some stream thing. We don't need to know about it. Let's not worry about it. There's an easier way. You can actually just do .json, let it parse it for you. So this will actually wait for the entire request to come through, parse it into JSON, and give you that object back because we know this is returning JSON. So we'll go ahead and set that up and call that data. And again, the other important thing to note is res.json is also a promise, meaning that we also have to await that. So we're waiting for the fetch call to go out, come back. That's kind of the preliminary, did the call succeed or fail? So we wait for that. And then the second one is waiting for the actual data. So we need to do both of those. So both of these keyword awaits are important. And then what we're going to do is do our set flights. So we've got that function up there that whenever we call that, it's going to change the value of flights and change anything on the front page that uses flights, right? So nothing right now, nothing uses it. So nothing's really going to change. You won't really see a difference from this code. We need to use flights somewhere. So let's go ahead and set that up. So right down here in our div, we want to be able to show the flights. So one way that you can mix, right now we've got HTML in here, right? We're showing a div. How do we show, TypeScript or JavaScript code? How do we execute code inside of this div? You can kind of see it actually right here on this class name attribute. It's got these curly braces and styles.container, which is actually coming from the TypeScript code there. So you can actually use curly braces anywhere in your HTML code in here to execute your JavaScript or your TypeScript code. And so let's actually go ahead and just display flights 0. So just grab the first flight. And we'll go ahead and let's see what information we're getting out of this. Let's just get the flight number for now. So we're going to do that, .flight number. One thing to note is, remember, by our default, we have an empty array. So that actually might throw an error the first time it runs through. So there is a cool nifty thing in TypeScript you can do is you can just put a question mark before a dot, and that'll only resolve this flight number if this is defined. Otherwise, it'll save you from the null pointer exception, if y'all are familiar with that. So we'll go ahead and save this code and head back over to Safari. And you'll actually see right there, we do get our 5286. So if we refresh the page, you might see it's blank and then it kind of pops up. Because again, remember, this is going to render the page with nothing originally because it wants to show something to the user to be quick. And then at some point in the future, it's going to run that URL, get the fetch from it, get the JSON, and then set the flight. And then we're going to update this flight number. And so right now we've actually got, if you open up your dev tools and go into the network calls, you can actually refresh and see this flights call right there. And so that flights call came in, you can see all the result from it, but we're only using that first flight for the flight number right there, 5286. So, kind of right now you've got a working API working with a front end, displaying data on the page. But really quick, before we go to questions, since we are kind of running out of our time for the demo portion of the workshop, I'm going to show you guys how to kind of take an array of flights and just kind of list the flight numbers out. We have multiple, but we're only using one right now. How would you show all of them? So what we can actually do, is I'm going to remove the part where we only get one of them, is if you think about this flights array, right? The flights array is an array of all the different flights that you've got. But let's say we want to show a list of paragraph tags of all of the different flight numbers. So we want to essentially turn an array of flights into an array of paragraph tags with flight numbers. So if you're familiar with the map function, that does exactly what we need. So a map function, you'll see there, calls a defined callback function on each element of an array and returns an array that contains the results. So we can call map, put a new function inside of it, which is going to get one parameter, which is the flight, which you'll see it's a type any, but that's because our flights array is an any array. So that makes sense. This is one flight. And we want to return a paragraph tag with, again, curly braces, because we're inside of the HTML, flight number. So that'll be all the different flight numbers inside of it. And you'll see here that this is the linting thing I talked about, kind of helps you from causing problems. It's saying it's missing a key prop for an element. Whenever you're iterating like this, React likes to know and keep track of everything that's being shown on the UI. So if you don't have a key prop, when something could be either 0 elements or 13 or a million, it wants to know how to identify each one so that it knows that they're unique. So what you can actually do is pick a unique value, which in our case could be the flight number, and make that the unique value. Oops, and I pasted over the wrong part. So essentially we're telling React, hey, this paragraph tag, the thing you can use to uniquely identify it is the flight number. So just go ahead and use that is essentially what we're saying. And so if we go back to our UI, you'll actually see here we have a bunch of flight numbers now we can scroll through because these are all of the different flight numbers showing up in that API there. And because we're kind of mapping over all of them, right? We've got all of our different ones and we're showcasing these paragraph tags. So that's how you can kind of take a bunch of different things, turn them into an array of another type. So in our case, we're going from an array of flights to an array of elements. And so if you, in your case, if you wanted to have a full flight number thing mapped out here, like you wanted the flight number, then maybe you wanted the origin code, you could actually do that. And now you see here, you've got all the origin codes for these flights. You got BWI, you got SFO, you got EWR, there's a ton of them in here. And you could do more things with this. You could show multiple flights. You could have a link in here that then navigates you to another page, which then calls the API to find a single flight and show all the information on a flight. There's a ton of stuff you can do in here. And if you are more feeling adventurous, this API, you could actually fork and modify yourself to add more fake data to it. We just have flights right now and airports, but maybe you want to add passengers. Maybe you want to add crew members or food. Or cleaning schedules. There's a ton of stuff you could add to it to kind of beef out this mock data that we've got so far for you. And so that was kind of everything that I had just to kind of run through there. Seems like it was right at half an hour, which is fantastic. So at this point, if y'all have any questions, Melinda, Kyle, I don't know if y'all have any that are lined up.
Not already queued up yet.
No queued up. All right.
Do the jobs.
Perfect. So in this meantime now, while y'all are thinking about questions and stuff, let me go ahead and I don't want to open Slack on the thing. So I gotta type it. Oh, perfect. In Discord?
Yep. No, in the chat for YouTube. I'll put it in Discord too, yes.
All right, perfect. Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and post in the Discord here in our American Airlines channel. We actually have a link that if y'all want to post out. Oh, it's right up there.
Copy it again.
It's perfect. So we have a link here. It's a Google form if y'all want to submit. We are looking to hire specifically for those graduating in December and May. We have an awesome program called the Adept program. I think we actually have one of our adepts with us this weekend online. Alex is online. Fantastic program. It's essentially a way to kind of learn everything there is at American. American's a huge company. It's a way to see behind the scenes, check out the baggage stuff, go look at how do we run the world's largest airline? 6,700 flights a day is crazy. There's weather, there's delays, there's cancellations. How do you deal with all that and get everyone to where they need to go? So you get to learn all about the behind the scenes stuff. You get to test out multiple teams to figure out where you want to work at American. We have machine learning, we have front end, back end. We have so many internal tools that we build to make everything work properly. We have infrastructure. It's just flight attendants, pilots, so much software that we write at American and so many awesome people behind it. And this is an amazing program to learn as much as that as you want. Really, you get the opportunity to learn as much as you want. Is really the best way to put it. And so please, if you are looking for a job, definitely check out that form. I highly suggest this program. If maybe you're not graduating right away, we do have just a generic job link. That's kind of where all of our internships are posted. We're specifically hiring for the ADEPT program, but if you're not, ready to graduate, no worries. We still do internships and some co-ops sometimes. So those all get posted to our jobs link. But if you submit to the Google form and send us your resume and all your information and stuff, that'll go to the rest of the team and everything to try to find the best opportunities for y'all. So yeah, definitely. And so there'll be information posted on American Airlines. Also, shameless plug about our awesome prize. So we are giving for anyone that works on pretty much stuff that is a cool, innovative solution that either improves the lives of our customers or our team members. If you win first place, that's 100,000 advantage miles for your team. So if you've got 2 people on your team, that's 50,000 each. That's enough round trip international, I believe, to Europe or Asia. So that's a crazy trip. And shameless plug, I actually did win this prize when I was a college student, and I did go on a European trip. It was fantastic. So I highly suggest competing for this prize. So yeah, it's honestly fun. We're all around tonight, tomorrow, this weekend to talk about your ideas. The airline's really complex. If you have questions, you want to bounce ideas off us, anything, we're here for y'all. So yeah, that's kind of the spiel. I see some questions in the chat here. I think Kyle's also replying to them. Fall spring internships, those are the jobs.a.com link. If you scroll up towards the top where we see the where hiring section, that jobs link, that's where internships will be posted. I think they should be showing up fairly shortly, either this month or sometime shortly in the future. We're specifically here with kind of the early in for the ADEPT program. So if you are looking for internships, then yeah, that'll be through that. But if you are looking for, if you are graduating, then the ADEPT program is where you're going to go. Otherwise, if you are a junior or a sophomore, we have the internship program, and then we'll see y'all at a hackathon in the future, hopefully, to be able to hire you through the ADEPT program. Any questions in the chat?
None yet.
Cool. I'm kind of in a Zoom room alone by myself here, so I'm kind of just reading off the.
Michael did a voice to Google form if you want to point him to that in our Discord channel.
Yes, perfect. Yep, the Discord is in the link for the Google form is in our Discord channel, American-Airlines. It's in the sponsors and partners towards the left side here. So it's been posted 3 or 4 times now, somewhere throughout here. Look for the forms.gle link. That's the one you want. It's throughout here. That's where all of our information will be posted. Also, shameless plug, our side prize coming up towards the future. Flappy Plane is going to have some awesome prizes. We're really excited. If y'all have been to some of our other hackathons, you know what the game is. But for those of you on the call, I'm going to give you a little hint. You might want to brush up on your Flappy Bird skills for those that remember that game. But yeah, it's actually a really cool game that shameless plug I built. But it's really cool. I like to say it's hack proof. So if you do manage to hack it, please tell me so I can fix it. But yeah, 10 a.m. tomorrow. It'll be great. It'll be open for an hour, and then I'm going to leave it on afterwards so y'all can just play around with it. But yeah, first person or the top 3 on normal difficulty will get some awesome Amazon gift cards.
And the API link is in Discord.
Yes, API link is in Discord. Honestly, for a lot of our stuff here, even who we are, like I actually just realized I was so worried about hitting our timeline that I didn't even introduce myself. I'm John. I'm a software developer on the emerging tech team. I get to work on a lot of really cool stuff at American. All of our information is in the who we are section. All the information for the prizes is in the challenge and prizes section. And the resources for that API is in the resource section. And if you're looking for a job or an internship, that's in the we're hiring section. All in our Discord channel towards the top, big bold headers for all of them. Super easy to navigate. Sweet.
Nothing else right now.
All right, well, we'll hang around for a couple more minutes, but otherwise I think we might be able to end early. Let y'all get back to hacking.
The API link is in Discord, right?
API link is in Discord. Right here. You know what?
We're happy to chat.
Yeah, we're happy to chat. You want to hop on to a DM, talk to us, whatever. I guess other shameful plug, if you're curious about some other cool stuff we do at American, we do have quite a few open source projects that we've actually done. So, if you're curious about our GitHub, we do have public American Airlines GitHub, which has a lot of cool open source projects. So we have things like Simply NV, which is a really cool library. Environment variables are kind of a pain in JavaScript. There can be a lot of ways to get really stupid bugs. That kind of solves them all for you. That was a really cool project that the emerging tech team was actually able to open source. We have different things in here like Hanger. We use that for hackathon sponsorships. It's currently for Slack primarily, but we're actually rewriting that currently for Discord. So that'll be really cool starting hopefully next year to start being able to reintegrate that into our hackathon setups. Flight Engine, again, that's the library that I've been kind of utilizing throughout this workshop, stuff that's available open to y'all. And then just some other really cool stuff in here. We've got different Slack apps like Ticket Counter. We've open sourced things that help other companies manage tickets at companies, asking for a friend. We did this during the pandemic to be able to ask kind of those questions that people might not feel comfortable asking, to be able to feel like they're heard. That's a way for them to ask kind of anonymously, but still be within the whole Slack workspace. We use Slack quite heavily at American, if you can't tell. We also contribute back to other open source. So Backstage is a really cool project actually created by Spotify that is all about building developer portals. So internally, think of like AWS, but inside your company. So if you want to spin up a server, you want to get a database going, this kind of helps you organize all that. We do contribute back to that because we use that quite heavily at American as well. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff going on in American, both those public and internal. Tons of different technologies that we use here, ranging from, what did I list up here? We've got Java, we've got C#, we've got React, we've got Angular, we've got pretty much anything like Python, machine learning. I don't know, I work with like 3 languages at American for type. I use TypeScript, React, and Node. That's my tech stack at American for our team. But I do know that there is a ton of other technologies. Pretty much anything you can find. There's 2,500 members in IT. They all have a preference.
There is a question.
We have a question.
Can this be used for other applications other than flights? I think he means the API.
The API is kind of specifically for flights, although you might get me to nerd out a little bit about the way it's built here a second. So the API itself is really just for flights. It's kind of all wrapped around flight data right now. But if you do want to modify this to be something not flight related, you can totally do that. The way the library is kind of written, and I'm going to nerd out just kind of a quick second, is just randomized seed values. So honestly, the quickest way I've found to explain this is if you all ever played Minecraft, you make a new world and it asks you for a seed that you can enter. You know that if you enter the same seed for 2 new games, you'll get the exact same world. It's kind of the same thing. You enter the same date on 2 separate computers running the same server, you'll get the same flights back. So it uses certain unique values. For flights, it's the date, and that'll generate the same flights on all computers. You could use the same system and set up an API to actually modify it for anything. If you wanted to change it to be trains, or if you wanted it to be, I don't know, board games or food or drinks or whatever, you can modify it to basically create random data, but that stays the same. So, the important thing about using a database is that you kind of get unique data to test with. This kind of does that for you without needing to set up a database or without needing to make sure, that each computer is set up to run the exact same way for your whole team. So this kind of gets rid of that for you.
No other questions yet.
Cool, great question, yeah. So like I said, there's this little write-up down there that we've got in there that kind of talks about all the cool stuff about that. If you are looking to kind of use this, it is set up in a way that is pretty easy to create fake data like that. So yeah, you could expand this on things other than flight data. All right, give it about another minute and a half. I know I don't know if there's a delay on YouTube. I know in the past there's been one. Yeah, I might give it a little bit. Some of y'all might be hearing my last spiel before you write your question. So we'll wait a minute here or 2. I guess in general, if y'all have any questions about your technical stuff, we're also around. So if you need help with your React app, your Node app, maybe some Java stuff, we might be able to help you out. We might not have all the expertise here for every language and everything. We're only a small team here at the hackathon, but we'll at least, try to help you out to the best of our ability and try to get you going. And then if you do have any ideas for our hackathon or just want to know more about the airline industry, reach out in our channel. If you want to DM us, just let us know in that channel first so that we can make sure we see your message. And then we'll start talking with you. Cool. Well, if there's no other questions, then I think we can end it 15 minutes early.
No,
Maybe one? Nope, no question. All right. Did you guys check the Discord one too?
I can hear you.
The
Awesome.
YouTube one says, say, searching for and continue updating parking spaces in an area.
I think that was a
That was
continuation of the API
Okay.
question.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, from there. All right. Cool. Awesome. We'll go ahead and end that there. Awesome. Thank you all for listening. Hope you all learned something. And if you have any more questions about any of this or any other stuff, just let us know. Thanks.